Hi,
Hi.
welcome back. Guys, Arknights Endfield has power creep. Our beautiful red-haired demon got power crept by a cute pink-haired wyvern who got side-crept by a tiny wolf who both got power crept by the lightning leak lady Hatsune Fangiku. But that's not even the worst part. Valley 4 batteries got absolutely demolished by Wuling batteries. It's not even a competition. Factory has insane HP inflation. Jokes aside, there have been talks about power creep in Arknights Endfield recently, and with contingency contract coming soon, do we need to be worried about things like power creep and HP inflation affecting this mode? Well, when Endfield first released, Lavatain by far did the most damage in the game, and as easy as the game really is, it honestly seemed like way too much at times. You can clear the hardest content in this game in seconds with actually P0 units, fully accessible to F2P players, and now that's even more possible with the characters that came out after. When the game launched, Yvonne wasn't that great, especially compared to Lavatain, and you could even say Last Rite performed just as well, if not better in many cases. One of the reasons for that is because Yvonne didn't have someone to inflict cryo or nature instantly on demand, while also applying debuffs and dealing good damage. Gilberta's skill took a while to inflict nature, and if you were fighting a boss it could move, and you could fully waste a skill point. That's where Tung Tung came in, and with her Yvonne's rotation became much smoother, and with Soup Soup's capabilities, Yvonne became much stronger than Lavatain as well. Tung Tung also no doubt helps out Last Rite, but not as much as Yvonne. Rosie's release came with not much fanfare because she doesn't really do that much more damage than Yvonne and Lavatain. She's like a side grade, and she's just another really great 6-star DPS unit. Zhuang Fengyi's release is the big one because she could do a lot more damage than everyone else. But it's not just a simple thing to point at and say, power creep! It's a little more complicated than that. Arknights Endfield's combat system has been controversial ever since it came out, since many players that came from the mainstream games to play Endfield didn't really know what they were looking at, as this entire system, from character builds to character kits and interactions, even enemies, and obviously the entire system itself where all your 4 units are on the field, is much different than what they're used to. It's not as flashy as Wuthering Waves, it's much slower paced because nobody dashes around like they're an approaching storm. Even the approaching storm herself has pretty stationary animations. It doesn't work like Genshin Impact because rather than matching elements together, you can really use whatever elements you want because reactions are order based rather than addition based. Plus, elemental inflictions and elemental reaction states are different in Endfield than a game like Genshin Impact since the system is so different. Character kits and interactions are also different. Rather than rotating in and out or doing ultimates one by one, you use your skills sequentially and then your combo skills in whatever order they appear. Now, power creep is when newer characters do more damage than older characters, and in its most simple form, it could simply be the newest character having higher scaling than previous units. However, all of these different systems can result in different types of power creep that aren't just multiplier scaling, and at the end of the day, a bunch of factors can come in together to make a game's balance feel like shit. In games like Wuthering Waves, really the worst type of power creep that could happen. Now, just to be clear, I'm not here to argue whether it is happening or not, but whatever power creep could happen in this game is mostly damage scaling. There's not much opportunity for anything else. A character simply having higher multipliers than another, or 2 characters doing the same damage, but one character utilizes a support that has higher scaling support capabilities. Again, not arguing about it currently happening in WoWA, this discussion is about Endfield, this section just serves as disposition. In a game like Genshin Impact, the worst type of power creep happening is again number scaling, especially when most of everyone used the same team comp, and the characters with higher damage scaling usually did more damage. But recently there's been other trends that messed with the game systems, like elemental reactions being locked behind regions. In a game like Honkai Star Rail, the worst type of power creep happening right now isn't necessarily just characters doing more damage through scaling, even though they are, but the real culprit has always been characters' kits doing way more than they're supposed to. And the straw that broke the camel's back for me was Castoris having resistance penetration she doesn't need, and Anoxa implanting literally every single element. Right now in Honkai Star Rail, the meta is relatively healthy since you have so many options to choose from. It's not even that bad for F2P players anymore, it's mostly just game balance itself that is pretty dog. But now, what about Arknights Endfield? So, right now it's safe to say that Zhuang Fengyi is the strongest DPS unit in the game. However, it's also not super cut and clear. There are many situations where units like Yvonne and Rosie, probably Lavatain, but I haven't personally had that happen to me yet, could clear faster than Zhuang Fengyi. But when looking at the bigger picture, Zhuang Fengyi can sustain more damage than every other character, and there are a few reasons for that. First off, Lavatain is probably currently the weakest limited 6-star DPS unit in the game, and even though I do say weakest, it's still very close between all of them, and I'd say that if Zhuang Fengyi is 100%, Lavatain is at a 90%, and Rosie and Yvonne are at around a 95%. The reason Lavatain is the weakest isn't exactly because of her kit itself, even though that is one small reason, but more so because of her teammates. They're by far the weakest teammates out of all the strongest 6-star DPS units, even though the team is also the most F2P friendly limited 6-star DPS unit team in the game. While Ardelia is a great debuffer, and while you can give Akakuri and Wolfguard gear and weapons that buff Lavatain's damage, Wolfguard and Akakuri's kits themselves only help Lavatain deal damage instead of also buffing up her damage. Meanwhile, Yvonne's teammates are the strongest in the game, those being Gilberta, Zaihi, and Tang Tang, who not only help Yvonne with her rotations, but also buff her up quite a lot. If Lavatain got a new teammate in the form of a heat element Zaihi, for example, instead of Wolfguard, she'd do much more damage. The other reason is that Lavatain's enhanced skill during her ultimate requires you to use up a skill point on one of her teammates every other basic attack chain or so that you can get enough Molten Flame stacks to use her enhanced skill. Otherwise, it deals much less damage and doesn't apply combustion. While Zhuang Fengyi's enhanced skill doesn't really require much and you can more or less spam it without worrying about her teammates. Part of that is because Fengyi's teammates can also do way more combo skills than Lavatain's teammates, applying their effects much more often. Now, Yvonne's teammates are also stronger than Zhuang Fengyi's teammates, and that is one reason why Yvonne can sometimes clear faster, but the bigger reason is that Fengyi's ultimate takes such a long time to charge up, even longer than Lavatain. When you do get it up, you can absolutely deal a shitload of damage, much more than everyone else could do in the same 25-second time frame. However, Yvonne and Rosie can deal more ultimates in, let's say, a 5-minute battle, and while Zhuang Fengyi would no doubt end up dealing more damage overall, Yvonne and Rosie wouldn't be far behind in a 5-minute battle, and a 1 to 2 minute battle would also be in favor of Yvonne and Rosie, since they can get their ultimates up much sooner. The biggest example of this currently in the game is stage 6 of the 4th Umbral Monument set, where the title class can get a shield up after it wakes up from being stunned the first time, and if you don't kill it while it's knocked down, the battle will be a lot longer. In most of my testing, Fengyi could never get her ultimate up before then, while Rosie and Yvonne easily could, and they'd more or less defeat the title class by then. So in the end, I do think it's pretty damn balanced rather than being real power creep. Now in Umbral Monument, every single enemy has the same resistance to every single element, instead of different enemies having different resistances and weaknesses. This is no doubt done to make Umbral Monuments much friendlier to beginners, however it's also terrible game balance, because let's say there is a 5-minute battle, there is no reason to use anyone over Zhuang Fengyi other than that you like them. I don't doubt at all though that they will change this in Contingency Contract, which is a mode much more for hardcore players at harder difficulties, and I also don't doubt that they'll introduce some element resistance modifiers, so there will be some stages where Lavatain might perform just as well or even outperform everyone else, which is a good thing. And also, especially if our beautiful ice cream loving redhead cutie gets a new teammate. So in the end, there is not much power creep if at all in Arknights Endfield currently, and even though I do believe that by the 1st anniversary we are going to get a Wishadel-esque unit, I also think that endgame content will still be accessible to everyone, so glory to Hypergriff. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Rain Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.